You're on the Spot with Mandy Wilkes.
Welcome to On the Spot. I'm Mandy Wilkes. This past Thursday, I held the inaugural Property Tax Convention at the Horry County Assessor's Office. Now, here in the studio with me today is Horry County Assessor Rendell Mincy to talk a little bit more about this. Now, the Property Tax Convention, for those of you unable to attend, was something that came about because of overwhelming response from all of you, the viewers. The past few weeks, I've been talking a lot about property taxes and how exorbitant they've become, especially in light of the faltering home market here, and how the property tax appraisals haven't gone down as the home values have gone down. So I decided that a property tax convention was in order, especially within the context of the delinquent auction that was held just this past week in Horry County for those people who were unable to pay their property taxes. Now, I decided to hold the convention this week because of the auction and also because of certain things going on within the assessor's office, such as appeals for property taxes going unanswered for, I think almost a year now. So when I come back, I'll be sitting down with Horry County Assessor Rendell Mincy to talk a little bit more about this. I'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Mandy Wilkes, and I am on the spot today with Horry County Assessor Rendell Mincy to talk a little bit more about property taxes. Now, I called my property tax convention Confront the Slumlord, and that took place this past Thursday in Conway at the assessor's office. The reason I called it Confront the Slumlord was because the fact is that you don't own your home even after it's completely paid for. You rent your home and all your other property from the government, and you pay rent in the form of annual property taxes. So that's why it was called Confront the Slumlord, and I appreciate Horry County Assessor Rendell Mincy for being so receptive to you all's questions and concerns. Now, welcome, Rendell.
Thank you.
Nice to have you on the show. I do appreciate you being so open to talking to viewers about property taxes.
Certainly.
I know everybody appreciated that. It's nice to have some transparency and accountability in the government, and not all government officials are willing to go on the spot and on the record. So I think we all in Horry County appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now, I want to ask you a few questions for those people who couldn't participate in the property tax convention. On behalf of all Horry County residents, everybody watching out there, I want to ask you why your office is still using home values from 2008, right at the kind of the height of the real estate bubble.
Well, actually, Mandy, it's in accordance with our state statute, which tells us when we implement a reassessment, there is a established date of value that comes along with that. And when we do reviews for that reassessment, or any reviews actually between reassessment, our reviews result in what that value should have been when that reassessment was implemented. And that is a requirement by statute. It's been challenged in some of the other counties, and in Beaufort, Charleston, and Lexington, the administrative law courts have ruled that yes, this is what the statute means, and this is what you do when you implement a reassessment. There's also an Attorney General's opinion which again substantiates that fact. So when we implement reassessment, it's kind of like a value is established and locked in until the next reassessment. And when you do file your appeals and we do those reviews, we'll review it to try to make sure and reestablish what the value of your property should have been as of the reassessment date. There's one exception to that, and that is what is referred to as the assessable transfer of interest, or what a lot of people call the point of sale, which allows us, when a property sells, to immediately go in and appraise it with a value as of December the 31st of the sale year for the following year. So you can have that situation where a property sells today that allows me to go in and bring that value up to its current value, where the same identical property that didn't sell can file an appeal, and I have to review that property with a value based on the last reassessment. So that is in accordance with the statutes and what we're required of.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that by statute you're only required to reassess every 5 years. Is that right?
That's well, The statute mandates that every 5th year, and of course we're on a certain cycle developed by the Department of Revenue when we began the 5-year cycle, and this every 5th year on the cycle we're on, we have to reassess. That is mandated by the statute. Now the statute will allow you to postpone the implementation of the reassessment for a year by ordinance, but that's only the implementation, not the program or the data value itself.
Not the reassessment itself. Well, you know, I anticipated that that would be your reasoning, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I've read the statute that you're referring to, and I notice it says that an assessor shall reassess values every 5 years. It doesn't say that an assessor can't reassess more frequently, only that it has to reassess at least every 5 years.
Yes.
So the way I read the statute is that you are free to reassess more frequently if you decide that you should do that.
Well, I'm not really sure if you know, we would be allowed to do that, but assuming we would be.
Well, would you be open to putting that in the court system and trying to do that to help Horry County residents, you know, with their declining, really rapidly declining home values?
Well, let me say this. We've got 254,000 parcels of real estate in our county, and we all realize the changing conditions that have occurred in the last several years because of the decline in the economy. If I were or could decide to do a reassessment today, there's not a button that we can mash to bring all our values up to the current date. It will take time to reappraise 254,000 properties. So the very best we could do at the moment is within a 2-year period, hopefully get all these properties reassessed and brought up to current. Well, if you look 2 years out, we're going to be at the point of our cycle anyway. So to make
but
that
surely you don't expect for 2 years for homeowners and property owners to keep paying values that are inconsistent with the worth of those values.
Well, in the current statute and the reassessment period we're in, that's where we are with our values today.
Well, Mr. Mincy, I do want to say that I'm sure, you know, myself and everybody watching out there can appreciate that it's not completely in your hands, and that, like everything else political or government related, it's a bunch of, you know, red tape to get anything changed. And I'm happy to hear that you're at least receptive to reassessing more frequently in light of the changing and really shaky and unstable economy.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned appeals. I want you to comment about the status of the, I think, 6,000, 7,000 appeals that have been unanswered, I think now for almost a year. What's the status of those?
Well, that's true for those. Well, actually, it's 5,600 now. But just to give you a little bit of history of that, in the last 2 years, including the reassessment year, which was last year, we've had 32,500 appeals. We've answered a little over 27,000 of those. And when we planned our action as far as looking at the 20,000 appeals that came in for reassessment, I had to look at how to expedite getting this total 20,000 appeals resolved as quickly as possible, but at the same time assuring the taxpayer that these reviews that are done for them are going to be done in detail and reassured that that data value that we're bound by is accurate. Now, no matter how we do this, there's going to be these taxpayers that's at the end of that process. And
do you happen to, excuse me for interrupting you, do you happen to have any figures off the top of your head about how many appeals were successful, meaning how many people that sent in an appeal actually had their property taxes lowered?
Well, I don't right off the top of my head. I can tell you we've seen a variety of different situations. Of course, we've got the 15% cap that was implemented with the reassessment, which basically said if there had been no change to your property between the prior year to reassessment and reassessment, maximum amount your property value could increase would be 15%. And of course, exceptions to that again is the ATI, or the assessable transfer of interest. Well, in our review process, what we've seen is we've seen those that there is, and we're reviewing the market value of the property, okay? We've seen reviews that have resulted in no change.
That's the most, what I've seen from and heard from viewers the most is that there's been no change. Most appeals have been unsuccessful. And
we've had reviews that have resulted in a change in the market value, but now down to the point of where the 15% cap is. So in those reviews, they're seeing an adjustment in their market value, but they're not seeing any change in their taxable value that they're paying taxes on. And of course, the third situation will be those who have been adjusted to the point that they've fallen below the cap and actually do make a difference.
That's what we all hope for when we send in our property tax appeals. Now, I want to get to a solution, a proposal I have, because on this show I'm really all about solutions. But before that, I just want to get your comment on, you know, I mentioned that the delinquent auction was this week for those who didn't pay their property taxes this past week. Now, those people didn't pay their taxes on time, and so the government took their property from them because that's the way the law reads. What's your comment about your office not responding to appeals on time and there being no repercussion from we the people because of that?
Well, in the appeal process, the appeal doesn't eliminate the requirement to pay the taxes. It doesn't stop that payment until the appeal is resolved. The taxes are due as they would be in any tax year. And again, it's the number of appeals that we're having to deal with and the length of time that it takes us to
well, I'm happy that it takes a long time, because I'm assuming that means it's detailed and thorough and fair. But you know, the number of appeals really speaks to the heart of why you're sitting with me today, and that's because your values, your home values that you're using to base property taxes on are just outdated. So I hear you being very receptive to that, and you don't seem to disagree with that at all. So let me kind of get what your thoughts are on a solution that I'm proposing. I understand that it would take a lot of red tape probably to do a reassessment more frequently, like, you know, right now, than the 5 years that's become standard. So what I'm wondering is, would you be open to helping get a rebate mechanism involved, whereby taxpayers would get a rebate when properties are reassessed, because they're definitely going to be reassessed at a lower value. We all know that, unfortunately. And so taxpayers really are due a refund. But right now, there's no mechanism in place by which taxpayers can be rebated the money that they've overpaid into your office. Would you be open to that?
That's really, well, let me say this. In the appeal process, if their values are adjusted below the taxable value they're paying taxes on, they do get refunds back for that currently. For example, for those 6,000 that are waiting to hear from their appeals, when we review those values, and should we make an adjustment to those values that affect their taxes due, they're going to get refunds for that overpayment that they paid.
But that would be based on the 2008 values still.
That is
so
correct.
That doesn't quite get at the root of the problem. So would you be open to, you know, what I'm proposing, let me kind of clarify a little bit. In 2012, when reassessments are scheduled to take place anyway, and those reassessments demonstrate that the home values have declined and therefore the property taxes owed have declined, would you be in favor of your office helping to refund and rebate to taxpayers that what amounts to an overpayment?
Well, the next reassessment that we'll be doing, of course, will be implemented in 2014. And when you implement a reassessment, there's a process that we have to go through called the rollback in the millage rates. So when these assessment goes downward, and what it basically is you have to take your new reassessment base and match it against your previous year revenue amount. So if you were into a situation where values went down below the previous tax base, then that rollback millage in itself is going to push forward an increase in the millage rate to make that match occur. So the adjustment in values here is going to be offset by increase in millages that are spread throughout the county and different areas. To answer your question,
thank you. I was just going to say I'm not sure where the answer was in that.
I'm not, in a position to object to anything as far as helping the taxpayer. I mean, everything we do under the statutes that we have to work with is an effort to try to help the taxpayers. So I answer you with that statement if it helps the taxpayers. Myself as the assessor certainly doesn't have any objection.
I appreciate that, and your office seems very receptive to helping the taxpayers. I hope that we can really, make a change for everybody watching, because people are losing their homes as a result of this.
I do think, though, we have to be realistic in how quickly a reassessment can be done with 254,000 properties, which is the largest amount of properties in the state.
Well, I have to be honest and play devil's advocate for a minute, because that is my job. The viewers expect that of me. I understand it takes time to reassess 254,000 parcels. Nobody would disagree with that. But the fact is, your office, along with I guess whichever offices help you with this, had no problem finding the time to take from delinquent taxpayers the property that they didn't pay taxes on. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. My dad always says that, and he used that actually in conversation with me about as I prepared for this very interview, and I say that to you now. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and surely it takes a lot of time, but your office hasn't had trouble finding the time to kind of catch delinquent taxpayers. So I would hope that you would, use fair play a little bit.
Yeah, but again, we have to be realistic on what can be done and over what time period it can be done. It's like I mentioned earlier, you can't mash a button and bring all the values up to date with 254,000 parcels. It's a reality that it's going to take time to reappraise this entire county to bring everything currently to where it should be. And
on that note, I'm going to close the interview because I think you have a very good stopping point. Reality is why we're here. The reality is that everybody watching has seen their home values decline exponentially while their property taxes have stayed the same. And so that's why I wanted to have you on here to speak a little bit about the reality of the situation that we're facing and how it's really affecting taxpayers right here in this county. And Mr. Mincy, I appreciate having you on, and I appreciate your really astounding receptivity to talking about this and being open about the process and bringing some accountability and transparency into county government. I really do appreciate that, and I think I speak on behalf of all viewers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, I will be right back with Government Gone Wild segment of the week. Welcome back. It's time for our Government Gone Wild segment of the week. Now, last week I told you about a little boy in Ohio who had been taken from his mom because he was fat, placed in foster care because he was fat. This week, in response to that story, a viewer, Cornelia from Florence, emailed me this really crazy story about a Chicago public school banning students from bringing lunches with them from home to school. Now, the principal defends the prohibition, saying that it's about nutrition, that the school provides better nutrition than parents who send lunch with their children. But if you remember a few weeks ago, I was telling you about a story whereby Congress said that pizza has tomato sauce, therefore it's a vegetable and is suitable to feed to your kids as a vegetable in school lunches. So it's pretty obvious that school lunches are not nutritious at all, and far less nutritious than I think parents who send lunches home with who send lunches to school with their kids. So it doesn't make sense on that count because schools know nothing about nutrition. That's why we see childhood obesity at huge alarming rates. Now, that's to say nothing about the stomping of parental rights in this regard, because I mean, come on, schools saying that you as a parent can't even send lunch home, lunch to school with your kids. That is really the height of just government gone wild. I mean, that's That's stomping on parental rights, and it just doesn't even make sense. And like I said, it's not even for a good cause because schools know nothing about nutrition. So that's our first government gone wild. The second has to do with a Seattle couple who has had their home raided by federal officials because they have been committing some kind of fraud with the food stamps, disability checks, and $1,200 a month in housing vouchers that they've been receiving since 2003. Now, I mentioned that they had their home raided. That home is $1 million, actually $1.2 million, and it's waterfront on Lake Washington in Seattle. So guess what? The couple wasn't actually breaking any laws. They haven't been charged with a crime because it's not illegal to do what they're doing. They are using a loophole in the federal system whereby they can take disability, food stamps, and $1,200 a month in housing vouchers. That's thousands of dollars a month in public assistance, and still live in a house that cost well over $1 million. Now, this is government gone wild because the couple didn't even break any laws. This is a loophole. The federal government is using your tax dollars to let people like this couple, and I'm sure many more, hundreds of thousands, if not millions more, completely live off of you and me as taxpayers in a $1 million home. Government gone wild. I will be right back. Welcome back to On the Spot. I'm Mandy Wilkes, and I actually have some good news about the federal government. This year, Congress has been more unproductive, less productive than it has since the 1990s, in fact. What do I mean? Well, the U.S. House of Representatives passed just 326 laws this year, and the Senate passed just 368 laws this year. Now, that's still a whole lot of laws, probably way more than we need, but it's a start because the government being unproductive is about the best thing in the world. I mean, when do you hear anybody say that unproductivity, lack of productivity is a good thing? Well, in the government and in Congress, it is, because every time the government passes a law, it's probably either spending your money or trampling on your rights. So I think it's really good news, and I'm happy today to report that Congress had a very unproductive year, and in fact I hope that when the South Carolina legislature reconvenes in January that it will be the most unproductive year in history. All right, and now some bad news about the federal government and spending. Now, for the past couple of Sundays, I've highlighted the exorbitant waste taking place in defense and in military spending in the federal government. Now, 2 weeks ago, I declared a war on war because endless wars are bankrupting this country. Then last week, if you'll remember, I reported on a wasteful boondoggle that the military has wasted so far over $40 million and counting, and it's all because of crony capitalism. And now this week, I am reporting about President Obama's deployment of 1,200 National Guardsmen to find, catch, and deport illegal aliens. Now, so far, the program has been successful, at least in terms of numbers of illegals caught. So far, over 25,000 illegals have been caught and deported. But the other numbers tell a little bit of a different story, because to catch each of those 25,000 illegals cost $6,000 per each illegal deported. So far, President Obama has spent over $160 million and counting on the program. So that's $6,000, over $6,000 per illegal deported. We just cannot afford it. Also, this doesn't even get to the root of the problem, which is borders or unsecured borders to begin with. This is just a Band-Aid. I mean, 25,000 people being deported kind of neutralizes the surely 25,000, over 25,000 illegal immigrants that come in every year. So it's just a Band-Aid. It doesn't get to the root of the problem. And like I always say, the bottom line is the bottom line. And we taxpayers cannot afford this boondoggle at all right now. So the bottom line is the bottom line, and that's no different in this case. I'll be right back with Hot and Bothered. Welcome back. I'm hot and I'm bothered, and it's not just because you decided to turn me on in your living room this morning. I'm so hot, in fact, for a pair of Democratic senators from South Carolina, House reps from South Carolina, that I've had to take off my jacket. That's how hot I am for these two guys. The first one is Representative Bakari Sellers. Now, I said he's a Democrat, and he is, but guess what? He's proposing a tax cut for each gallon of gas you buy. So instead of spending 16 cents in tax for every gallon of gas, if his bill gets passed, you'll be spending a little over 14 cents. Now, it's not a huge difference. It's kind of small potatoes, but it adds up. And I'm definitely for any little bit of help, any little bit of tax cuts for the taxpayers out there. Now, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I do have to wonder, why is it that a Democrat has to stand up for tax cuts and fiscal conservatism? Now, I'm a Republican, but I'm only a Republican because I'm a fiscal conservative. And so when I see a Democrat or a Republican or anybody standing up for taxpayers and for fiscal conservatism, I have to praise them. And so moving on to the next legislator I'm hot for today, that would be Representative Boyd Brown from Winsboro. Now, Representative Brown is introducing term limit legislation that would apply to all South Carolina elected officials. I spoke about the importance of term limits last week and my support and endorsement of Senator Jim DeMint's term limit legislation on the federal level. And I also told you about a ballot referendum that I'm calling for on the state level, so that voters can vote directly on the issue. That's why I am hot for South Carolina Representatives Boyd Brown and Bakari Sellers for standing up for taxpayers and for fiscal conservatism, accountability, and transparency. All right, now for what's got me bothered. A viewer, Tom from Socastee, emailed me this next story about a family who lost their house to fire. Now, the family lost their house to fire as firefighters stood by and watched the house burn down because the family had neglected to pay the $75 annual fee to have access to the fire department. Now, the viewer who emailed me about this, Tom, seems to think this is an indictment of my if tax. Now, the if tax, which I introduced a few weeks ago on the show, basically says you pay for a government service only if you use it. You're only taxed if you use some service. Now, an if tax only works, Tom, let me clarify, in light of and in the context of a comprehensive tax reform system. That's the only way it works. It doesn't work if we just keep piling fees on top of the taxes that are already there. And by the way, if the fire department wanted to make a point, they could have just fought the fire, saved the family's house, and charged the $75 after the fact. All right, that's it for this week's show. Next week, same time, same place. Keep turning me on, and I'll keep turning you on.